Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to get through this without coughing very loudly into the microphone. Okay. And I'm going to talk about how not to lose your sponsors. We have the... Great. I'm going to talk about sponsorship. And I know there have been a few conversations about sponsorship already this weekend, so hopefully I can add to the things that you've learned, share some things that I've learned that will help you getting money for your events. So I am Arelia on GitHub, on Twitter, pretty much everywhere. And I am on the GitHub education team. I joined in March. And I've been working on the MLH partnership. So it's been really great to meet so many of you and talk with so many of you this weekend. And I hope to visit your hackathons this coming semester. Before I worked at GitHub, I worked as a software engineer for different companies in Chicago. And while working full-time, I have also worked with different organizations that teach tech to people who are underrepresented in tech. Girl Develop It, I'm the chapter leader of Girl Develop It in Chicago. That organization teaches adults, primarily women and individuals, non-binary individuals. And Coderspace serves high school students on Chicago's South Side. I also co-organized PromptConf, which is a new tech conference happening in Chicago next month. So all of these organizations have at least one thing in common. They need money and support, just like your hackathons do. So I'm going to talk about what I've learned working with these organizations. And we're going to also cover a process for getting sponsors. And then I'm going to ask you to remember to share what you've learned with the people who are coming in your organization after you. So best practices. Coderspace is an organization, like I mentioned. We teach web development to high school students on Chicago's South Side. My co-founder, Demond, and I, we are the instructors, and Demond was a graduate student at the University of Chicago when I met him. And because he was a graduate student at the university, he was able to apply for the Community Accelerator program. The university is also on the South Side, and so the Community Accelerator program serves to support, provide an incubator for initiatives and programs that support the surrounding area, support the South Side of Chicago. So Demond applied Coderspace for this program, and we were part of the inaugural group of programming that was selected. And it's been a great relationship that we've been able to grow since then. They gave us our first venue. They covered some of our expenses. And from that, we continued working with the university. They are still our, another incubator at the university is our venue now where we host our classes. We have a partnership with a computer science professor who's covered the Chromebooks that we provide to our students. And so because we have that shared mission of teaching computer science and supporting this particular community in Chicago, we've been able to maintain a really strong relationship. And so the first thing that I want you to take away is that the most sustainable support comes when you are aligned in mission and in values. I also am working with PromptConf. It is a conference where all of the organizers are from demographically underrepresented groups. And we set out to create a welcoming, inclusive conference for speakers and attendees who are also underrepresented in tech. The company I worked at before coming to GitHub is our venue sponsor. Because I worked at that company, I knew that they had a newly formed tech committee, and they were interested in supporting events and organizations that have a diversity, and they wanted to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts. They wanted to recruit and get their branding out, and they wanted to just be involved in the tech community in Chicago. So I knew these things, and when we brought the idea of PromptConf to that company, a conference that had a diverse group of organizers, we wanted to attract a diverse group of speakers and attendees, and we as organizers had experience in the Chicago tech community, we were the right conference for them to support, and it was an easy match. They are providing our venue, and they're also covering our food and beverages. So it helps to gather as much information as you can and know what is important to the sponsor. How do you get there? Let's talk about an approach for building your sponsorship prospectus and targeting your sponsors. We want to make it easy to say yes and design levels for viability. We want to choose our benefits strategically, and we want to put our attendees first and time our ask correctly. So maybe you don't work at the companies that you are targeting for sponsorship, and that might not work out each time, right? But what you can still reach out to your network, build your network, and get information to make your sponsorship request stand out. Companies receive several sponsorship requests each day, and you want yours to look like what they want to support. You want to find someone on the inside. Build your network. Are there meetups and networking events in your local area that you can attend? Do you have time to do that? Can you work with the rest of your organizer team to spread out that work of attending these events? Meetups are how I built my network, and I can draw a direct line from my first meetup in Chicago to getting sponsorship for this conference that I'm working on. Attend these events early and often, make new friends. Do this for yourselves and your career as much as you're doing it for your organization. You don't have to ask for anything. You don't have to have anything to offer anyone. You just want to start getting people to know your name and your face, and you want to start learning their names and their faces and forming those relationships. Especially get to know the people you see at multiple events, as well as paying attention to who's hosting. So the spaces that are hosting events might be spaces that are interested in hosting more events. There might be spaces that have a process in place for deciding who they want to invite in. They might have goals in place for why they want to invite in different organizations. They are a good company, or a good potential target because they're already involved in the community. And pay attention to speaking at meetups. So if you see speakers coming from the same companies, maybe they have representatives who are local to the area. Maybe that company is local to the area. That makes them more accessible to you. They're more likely to want to support things that are happening around them. So pay attention to speaking at meetups. Talk to those people after you've seen them speak. Start finding out, building a relationship with them, finding out what the company is supporting, how they make those decisions. Tap into your alumni networks as well. So the alumni of your university, the alumni of your organization who helped create your organization, they've probably talked about that organization outside of school. They've probably put it on their resumes. How many of you have put your organization work on your resumes already? Right. And so, since you've done that, you want your organization to be viable and visible, and you want people to be aware of what's going on. So you and they have a reason to want to support the organization, to maybe do recruiting for the organization and provide sponsorship for the organization. So talk to your alumni. They can help you find the right people to contact. They can help you get that information that I was able to get about the company that I worked with. You will get much further with your sponsorship request when you have an ally from your network, someone you know, someone you maybe saw speak and you spoke to them after you talked. You'll get further with those people than you will with cold emailing and cold calling. With. So I assume you're taking my advice and that you know someone at the target company. Then what do? You want to start a conversation, and you're going to find out what initiatives are high priority. Is there a process that's already in place, and who do you contact next? So what are the high priority initiatives? I knew what those initiatives were, those 4 initiatives were from the company that I worked with, And so if my event doesn't solve one of those problems, maybe that's not the sponsor that I want to target. Maybe I want to find another sponsor. By reaching out, getting some information, you can find out what's important to the company so you can determine if that's the right sponsorship fit. Does the company have a sponsorship process? So with GitHub Education, we provide a $1,000 hackathon grant to new members of the league. That is how we support hackathons in Europe and North America. So that's our process. As Joe Nash would say, interact with the standard API. If there is a process in place like a grant, that's the route that you want to take for getting sponsorship. Also find out who you might want to contact. So your contact, the person that you know, might not be in the position to make a sponsorship decision. But they already know you. You already have started building a relationship. You can let them know what you're planning even before you have all of your event details. And then they can either pass you on to the right person or give you the right contact information, or they can, even better, start having those conversations internally for you. Start finding out where are the sponsorship dollars and what is the sponsorship process, and start advocating for you and sharing your event information. So start talking with your contact early and get them to help you with getting information about approaching the company. Just like you want to practice building your network early and often reach out to your network, that's something you can do in advance, even before you have all of the details of your hackathon. And when you make contact, explain that you are planning an event and what you have in mind. Maybe there's a particular audience or theme. You're not yet asking for money, you're just asking for information. And so you're not asking anyone to make a commitment yet. You don't need an immediate yes or no. You're just getting the information that's going to help you build your sponsorship plan. And start documenting all of this now. Everything that you're learning, everyone that you're contacting, everyone that you're planning to target. You want to start that documentation at this point. And by the time you have an event date and a plan, you should know who to ask, how much you're asking them for, how to match your event initiatives with their goals, and what they might be able to say yes to. Next, we want to design our sponsorship levels for viability. You want to have at least 3 distinguishable sponsorship levels. You'll have an anchor tier. You're going to provide some additional ways to support, maybe some one-off things that a sponsor could cover. And you want to provide opportunities to donate if a sponsor is not able to support the tiers that you are presenting them with. We'll take a look at 2 models for building our sponsorship levels. The first one, we want to build a tier, and then the other tiers are. Is there an issue with, can everyone still hear? So, defining your sponsorship levels. The first thing you want to consider is your minimum viable budget. What is the minimum amount of money that you need to cover the essential costs of your event? That might not include t-shirts, it might not include a full meal, and maybe you can just get by with stickers and snacks for your event. Your minimum budget is just the essentials. You're also going to know the cost of your nice to haves, like the t-shirts and the meals. Also consider how many sponsors can you support? How much communication is your team able to handle? How many different people can you be in touch with? Look at your schedule. How much room do you have for giving up speaking time to sponsors? Look at your venue. How much room do you have for giving up table space to sponsors? That's going to help you determine how many sponsors you can support. So, building our first tier, our middle tier in this approach, our mid-level sponsorship amount would be our budget divided by the number of sponsors we can support. And then our highest level would be our mid-level amount times half the number of sponsors that we can support. Looking at all of that together, we have a hypothetical event with a budget of $10,000. If we're going to have our nice-to-haves, extra prizes, t-shirts, whatnot, we can cover that with $2,000 for this event. And we have decided that we can support 5 sponsors. So our middle level, based on those numbers, is our full budget, $10,000 divided by the number of sponsors, 5. And so our silver level sponsorship is $2,000. Our gold level is a little more than that. It is that mid-level times half the number of sponsors, which brings us to $6,000. And then our bronze level is based on just a little bit less than our middle level, so that, and we are going to add benefits to that middle level that will make it significantly more attractive, and that bronze level is going to be not so significantly less expensive, so that the middle level looks like a really good deal. We'll come back and talk more about that level, but let's look at the second approach, where our high level is our entire budget, and then our mid-level is half of that. So we're going to have our highest level, our full budget at $10,000, our middle level, half of that, $5,000, and then again, our bronze level is just a little bit less than that. So comparing these two approaches, you might use the second approach that covers your entire budget with one high-level sponsor. That might work if your event is smaller and your budget number is smaller. Or it might work if you have a larger event in a larger city that can provide that much funding. Maybe in that case, you want to use the second approach, have one sponsor at that gold level that is covering the entirety of your event, and you're giving them a bunch of benefits. The first approach might work better for larger hackathons where you're breaking up that cost among more sponsors. So with approach number 1, if you sell all 5 slots on the silver level, that covers all of your costs. Or if you do 1 gold level sponsor and a couple of silver sponsors, that'll cover your costs. Your bronze level is still high enough that if you sell only the bronze level to all of your sponsors, you are still earning a significant amount of money that approaches selling all of your silver level sponsors and covering all of your costs. So you're still in a good spot. This is not binary. You can mix these approaches and land in the middle, especially the bigger your conference gets, the more you want to deviate and use these 2 approaches to come up with maybe a range of numbers that you then land on for your sponsorship levels. You can have more than 3 tiers. You don't have to limit yourself to just 3 levels of sponsorship. That might not be right for your events and the sponsors that you have available in your community. So depending on how many you are targeting, how large your budget is, you want to decide how to use these 2 approaches. This is just a starting point. Don't forget that sponsors can cover one-off items. So if you've reached out to your sponsors, done your homework, had these conversations, and you know that they have smaller budgets and cannot cover maybe one of your sponsorship tiers, ask them to cover things like food or coffee. Ask them to cover just stickers. Or maybe they would be interested in being the sole sponsor for your closed captioning or an interpreter if you're having an interpreter for your talks. They might be able to cover one of these costs. They might also find it easier to cover a cost like this with a credit card versus signing on to a full sponsorship level. So give your sponsors options and different ways to support you. You're making it easy for them to say yes. Make sure that you are keeping track of how many sponsors you can support. Don't oversell your tiers. You have limited bandwidth for supporting and communicating with different sponsors. You have a limited amount of space that you can give to sponsors for tabling and recruiting. Don't overload the programming. You have a limited amount of time that you want to give up to sponsors versus to your attendees. You also want to prioritize one target sponsor in a given field. So if you have GitHub as a sponsor, you don't want to have one of our competitors also be one of your sponsors. In Chicago, we have several different parking spot finder apps. I don't want to contact more than one of those to be a sponsor. I don't want to advertise for a competitor at the same time that I have another sponsor. Keep all of that in mind when you're writing down your documentation about who you're targeting, so that you keep in mind who you want to contact. Let's talk about what we add to our benefit levels. So most of your sponsors are going to be interested in one of these three things: recruiting, branding, or selling their product, promoting a product. The PromComp sponsor was interested in those 4 initiatives: recruiting and branding explicitly, diversity, inclusion, and being involved in the tech community, which falls in line with recruiting and branding. You want to offer the right benefits to match the sponsor's goals. The company who wants to promote a product or share software might be interested in a workshop or a demo. The company who wants to build their brand might be interested in putting their logo on your swag or providing swag for your event. And recruiters might want a table or a time to speak to attendees. That's not to say that the company who wants to do recruiting doesn't want to also do swag, and it's not that the company who wants to do a workshop doesn't also want to speak separately for recruiting, but you want to prioritize those benefits that you're offering in your sponsorship levels based on, first, what you want for your attendees, and then what you know those sponsors want to provide. All of those benefits are valid in any tiers, but think about what your sponsors want and what sponsors you've already researched, and that will help you decide which benefits have priority across your sponsorship levels. Make sure to be flexible and have an open conversation with sponsors. Invite them to suggest benefits that maybe you have not added to your sponsorship levels. They might want a custom package. They might want a custom package so you can have a conversation about what other benefits you can combine for them and at what level you want to create for them. Don't assume what sponsors want, ask them. So GitHub Education, for example, we're not recruiting for the company, we are providing our sponsorship through the Hackathon grant. So, but I still see a lot of sponsorship requests that include recruiting. Again, you have done the research, you found out what the sponsors are interested in, and that's what you're offering them. That's what you're going with when you are contacting them. Consider custom packages for your bigger sponsors. I would consider a custom package for the target sponsor that I want the most, that I'm reaching out to first. And that's the one I'd have a conversation with about what am I not offering and what other levels might we come to an agreement on. Make sure to discuss with your team what you are offering in your custom packages before you confirm it with the sponsor, because you want to make sure that your team can support whatever you're offering, that you're not promising something you can't deliver. Put your attendees first and make sure you know what your attendees will want. Are they even interested in hearing a recruiting pitch? Maybe if they are, if you have students who are juniors and seniors and they're looking for jobs and they want to hear from different recruiters, maybe you include recruiting in each level of your sponsorship, in each level of your sponsorship prospectus, so that you have lots of recruiters for them to interact with. Otherwise, maybe you have attendees who have jobs that are looking to move. That doesn't mean you don't want to have any recruiters at your event, but maybe you save recruiting as a benefit for your very top level of sponsorship, and you're not offering it to everyone so that you only have one recruiter. So start with what is best for your attendees and what will provide the most value for them. It'll help you rank who you're targeting. It'll help you articulate the value of your particular attendee group to that sponsor. And it will help you approach them for the right amount of funding based on what you can offer them, and build the right custom or standard packages for that sponsorship. Be willing to turn down offers. At Coderspace, in Chicago, there's a lot of funding available for at-risk youth, but the south side of Chicago is not all at-risk youth. It is a socially, demographically diverse area, and our classroom is socially and demographically diverse. And so accepting money that is earmarked for at-risk youth, that doesn't necessarily align with what we're doing, and it may not be appropriate for us to take that funding that would label our students in that way. And so we don't apply for those grants, we don't accept that money. In your case, what is your target audience? What is your theme? If you are targeting an audience of people who are marginalized in tech, you want to make sure your sponsor is known to be welcoming to those groups that you are inviting into your event. If you have an event where your projects are all social good projects, you want to know what your potential sponsors are contributing to the community. You need to be mindful of who your organization associates with because your attendees are going to be mindful. They're going to be aware of those associations and know what's favorable and what's unfavorable. So put your goals for your attendees first over securing a particular sponsor. Lastly, think about the timing of how you're asking or when you're asking for sponsorship. You want to ask for sponsorship before your event timeline begins. You've already started forming those relationships throughout the year, and when you have started solidifying your event details, you're ready with your sponsorship prospectus, that's when you ask for sponsorship money. And you want to try to do that as far in advance as possible. Let's look at what quarters and fiscal years are. January, February, March is the first quarter of a year. April, May, June is the second quarter or Q2 of a year. And so quarters are sets of 3 months within a year. And those 4 quarters, or all 12 months, make up a fiscal year. For some companies, the fiscal year begins at the beginning of the year in January, and for some it begins in the middle of the year. So July, August, September would be the first quarter of their fiscal year. And the reason why the fiscal year is important is because Q1 is when companies start their budgets. That's when they have the most money available to potentially sponsor you. You want to find out when you're making that first contact, fiscal year begin. And so you want to find out so that you know when quarter 1 is. But even without that information, you know that January is going to be the beginning of a quarter, and let me back up, sorry. The best quarters to ask are Q1 and Q2. Q1 is when sponsors have the most money available to them. Q4 is when they have their use it. Might not be the time to the full support of a sponsor, but maybe that's when you ask for those one-off smaller items that are easier costs to cover. Quarters are always a set of 3 months, so even if you don't know when the fiscal year begins, you don't know if January begins Q1 or Q3, you know that January is a quarter. And so that information is still helpful because you can determine which quarter to ask for your sponsorship dollars in. You want to ask at least 1 quarter in advance of your event. If you ask at the middle or the beginning of the quarter, the sponsor is more likely to have to be able to allocate money from that quarter, or to know whether they have extra money in that quarter or they have extra money at the beginning of the next quarter that they can allocate to your event. At the end of the fourth quarter or the end of any quarter, that might be a time to ask for your one-off items that are smaller, not the best time to ask for full sponsorship. Make sure to learn the payment process. The quarter system is going to affect when you get paid. Companies are likely to hold payments until the end of a quarter. The finance team is going to be busiest between quarters and busiest especially at the end of a fiscal year. So those are times when it's going to delay you getting payment for your event. Secure sponsorship money early, and that'll help you plan for covering your event expenses. After you've gotten a sponsorship agreement, you want to find out how do invoices and process for getting payment. What do you do so that I am ready with all of that information to get payments transferred to my event, and what is the timing of your payments? Get that information as early as possible, and the earlier that you ask, the more time you're gonna have to work through all of that process, which can be a long process. Also keep in mind that typical payment terms are 30 days. And so you may have an agreement with the company that they'll pay out at the end, within a 30-day period. They're going to hold that money likely until the end of the 30-day period. Keep that in mind. You're not going to necessarily receive your money immediately after coming to a sponsorship agreement. And don't forget to provide payment options. I've said a few times, make sure you are providing options of things that your potential sponsors can cover with a credit card, because it might be easier for your contact to cover something with a credit card than it is for them to get a full purchase order. Really quickly, in your prospectus, don't forget to include all of these things. You would be surprised how many sponsorship prospectuses that I've seen that don't include maybe the number of attendees or the date of the event. So I see you, I will pause here for you to take a picture of this list. I see several cameras. And while you're including all of that basic information, you might want to include demographics of your event. Are you inviting primarily women and non-binary individuals? Is your event going to bring in a particular city, let your sponsor know that. If you have a code of conduct, link to that code of conduct. Let your sponsor know that you're going to hold your attendees accountable for their behavior and how you're going to do that, and that you have a plan for that. You all ready? Okay, last I want to ask you to remember to share knowledge with your successors. So who is graduating this year? All right, keep your hand up if you do not want your organization to succeed after you graduate. Right, okay, yeah. And I was talking yesterday with, I hope this is okay, Brandon from Westchester. We were talking about succession planning and not wanting to see all of the work that you've worked so hard on go to waste after you leave. So, like I said, and like I know there was a discussion group yesterday about documentation, I think from HackCon. You want to document everything. And you want to, in speaking about sponsorship specifically, you want to document how do you determine your sponsorship levels and offers? What are your custom sponsorship packages? What information have you gathered about sponsors and contacts? Because just like the alumni in your network, you want to see your organization succeed. You don't want to see all of your hard work go to waste. Don't make your successors cold call and start from the beginning with networking and information gathering. If you've already gathered that information, document it and hand it down. Here's a way to do that. Do a warm handoff. Send an email that says, "Hi, sponsor. Thank you for your support over the last few years. This is a new person who's going to be taking over. This is my last year in school, and here's a new person who's going to take over this sponsorship relationship. You're going to hear from them in the next few months, and we appreciate your continued support." So once you've done this, the sponsor knows the name of the new contact, and they're going to hear from the person. The new person has that sponsorship information, and you are maintaining that relationship that you've worked really hard to build. So maybe before you leave today, make a list of the sponsors and contacts that you have and know who you need to pass that information off to. It's also a good idea to have a dedicated sponsorship experience role. For MLH, and my sponsorship person is Eddie. I thank Eddie for answering all of my questions. Having a dedicated role helps to make the sponsor happy. That's someone who is making sure the sponsor has what they need, has all of their questions answered. It makes less work for the sponsor when they show up for the event, and then they can just go and talk to students and not have to resolve issues or answer or figure out more questions. So in closing, I want to remind you of 2 ways that GitHub Education provides support to hackathons. The Campus Experts Program is the community, in addition to MLH for you, of student organizers just like yourselves who can share their experience. They have received speaker training and leadership training, and community and training on how to build a community. And so they can share their tips with you on getting event sponsorship and building communities. The way to get that community and to get those tips is to become a GitHub Campus expert yourself. And so at 11, so in just a few minutes, there is a workshop on becoming a GitHub Campus expert. I hope you'll attend. I hope you'll take the last few hours you have today to find GitHub Campus experts, ask them about their experience, but definitely attend that workshop. It'll fast track you into the campus expert training. We also have the $1,000 hackathon grant. Many of you are probably here because you received that grant. If you have friends who are organizers who are not in the league, please remind them of that grant and let them know that GitHub provides $1,000 for new hackathons. Here are some references from MLH that were useful to me to review. All that I have shared with you today is from my own experience or talking with others or from the resources that I have read. And so if I haven't covered something in your experience, please come up to me because I want to hear what is different about your events. I want to hear what challenges you have experienced. I want to start learning ways that GitHub can support your organizations. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Arelia. We have time for a couple of questions. Put your hands up high if you have a question, and I will run to you with a mic.
I'm Yash from Sparta Hack. I just had a question. If you could give us some examples of some good payment options that hackathons can use. Because right now we just use checks, and that's not really helpful.
Are you talking about a specific payment provider, a way of submitting payment?
Like Stripe or Venmo or whatever.
Yeah. So my advice is to make sure that you can accept an invoice, can accept a check, that you have a bank account that can take in the lump sum of whatever money the sponsor is providing to you. Maybe have a credit card form on your website that sponsors can know how to submit credit card information to you. Have a donation button on your website, maybe so that sponsors know how to donate extra money. So I don't have a particular payment processor to promote, but just have those different options.
Is it usually difficult to get information about a particular sponsor's fiscal year, or are they usually willing to give that up? And as a sort of secondary question, is there a way to find out a given set of sponsors' fiscal information without necessarily asking them? Is there a repository for that kind of information?
I haven't seen a repository with that information, but I don't expect that it would be difficult to get that information. It's not a secret. It's not something that they would need to keep hidden. So ask your contacts, and they'll probably know.
Hey, Robbie here from MLH. I'm also a lead organizer on DurHack, a hackathon in the UK. My question is, what's something you've seen in a sponsorship prospectus that has really stood out to you?
Nothing in particular is coming to mind, but I think the most important thing to do is to say to the sponsor, what have we left out of this prospectus that you are interested in? Because what might stand out to me in a prospectus might be different from what stands out to another sponsor who has completely different goals. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is say, here's my prospectus, but this is an open conversation, and maybe there's something we haven't even thought of to offer that you might be interested in.
Hi, my name is Chris from Nighthacks. How do you differentiate the levels without affecting the experience of your attendees? Like, for example, what some people might do is they'll say you can send this many people, this many mentors, if you're at this level versus this level. But of course, we want to have the maximum number of mentors.
Right. And so with PromConf, we looked at how much space we have in our venue, and we decided to have 10 sponsorship tickets. I think is what we landed on, because we have a smaller venue for this conference. We don't want to overwhelm the conference with sponsor attendees. We want to save room for our attendees. So look at how much space you have for attendees before you are deciding how many tickets to give out to sponsors. And that might mean that if you only have a handful of sponsor tickets that you want to make available, then your sponsor tickets won't be in every level of your sponsorship levels. Maybe just the top level has the bulk of those tickets, and then the next level has the rest of those tickets, or one ticket each in your middle level, something like that. And then those lower levels maybe don't get to send attendees. And if that is something that's really valuable, price your levels so that those spots are valued. Price your levels so that you're getting the most money from the sponsors you are giving those limited spots to.